Oh, nice work, Mitch.
Yeah, I see that this call is being recorded. Who figured that out?
Mitch.
Oh,
Mitch did. I was talking with
okay.
him last week, and he figured it out.
Mitch, what was the secret answer?
I don't think he's on the
No,
call
okay.
yet. Last he told me he had to contact someone inside Google. I don't know what happened after that.
All right, I'm just looking at the agenda. Do we have a quorum? Not quite yet. Well, I guess we did temporarily when Sven was here, but he went again. I don't know if Shriram is coming today. Well, let's just give it another minute and then we'll get started. All right, we should get going. Is Costin here? Oh, look at that timing.
Yeah, just joined.
And look at that smile.
Hey, Costin, we're talking about you.
You mean Steve, because the multi-tenant is probably not going to happen this week, sorry. We discussed in the last environment working group.
Should I move it to the future agenda?
Nebulous future for now, because until 1.8, since nothing is changing in 1.8, we are not very motivated unless we have to.
All right.
So are you saying nothing is out of this work in 1.8, not even in documentations?
I don't think multi-tenant is something I mean, there are some aspects that were discussed with improving security, access control, and other small improvements, but they are not necessarily. I don't know if nebulous future maybe 1.9, but right now we have other things that we are focusing on, like external Istio at the end. Lynn, you were in the meeting.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I mean, I just want to make sure, we all understand nothing for 1.8 for this.
Yeah. I think next week we can have a presentation of the status. Anyway.
Okay. That brings us to the ever-delayed 1.7 retrospective.
So I don't think, I'm not seeing a value to do it now because we can't take those actions to improve. So I was thinking I'll share it offline with the newsletter if it's okay with everyone.
Sure.
That is fine, yes.
Okay.
Don, virtual machine beta graduation. Let me.
I think he's out today.
Oh, great.
Yes, that's true. He is out. I forgot about that.
All right.
Louis, if we run out of time, or if you have too much space in the schedule, you can tell us about Hawaii.
Okay. It's also my birthday today, if that helps.
Hey, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh boy. Where's the emoji for that one in the Hangout? Brian, contest.
Yep. So back in 0.8, we had a contest on the testing days to see who could complete the most tests. And there was a small prize given out for that. We've since gotten rid of that, and in the last couple of releases, we've had very low turnout for the testing days. I'm wondering, A, how well that worked for 0.8, and B, whether it would make sense to return to something like that to encourage more turnout for the testing days.
What was the small prize?
So Dimitri got an Android, Google Android thing.
Like a little toy?
Yeah.
Okay, and that was responsible for a large uptick in tests contributed?
I don't know. I know that we had that back then. I don't know whether it had it, but it kind of brings in gamification and that kind of thing towards testing. So I'm wondering if it worked.
I think we tried to have like dashboards of leaders and stuff.
Yeah, we have the metrics. COVID has killed all the tchotchkes.
Yeah, I mean, if it is a big motivator, I can work something out.
I don't know whether it was a big motivator or not. I was just getting involved in Istio at that time. I'm just wondering how we increase turnout.
Brian, do you know who drove that?
I don't.
I think it was either Jasmine or probably Jasmine.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Although Lily probably did the digging up of the prizes. I suggest the various folks, the various companies go and virtually rummage in their prize company.
And I realized it was April, not Lily. It's been a while.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, April was on the project back then.
Okay.
So are we looking for companies to have some prizes? Is that the ask here? I missed something.
My question is just how do we increase turnout on testing days?
Okay.
I think my guess is one of the problems we have is just testing isn't super exciting. It's more exciting to write new features and that sort of thing. So how do we make it more interesting for people to go out and do these same tests every release until we have everything automated?
Okay.
Yeah.
We can contribute.
I think we should be able to find some prizes. I don't think that's going to be for Google. That shouldn't be too big a deal.
Costin, what would motivate you to write more of these tests?
That's a pointed question, Josh.
I figure if we can make Costin write them, then everyone will.
Hey, Josh, what would motivate you to write more tests?
Yeah, good call. Touche.
We're gonna play the chain on this one. A nice bottle of Northern Spanish wine.
Yeah, maybe like an Istio leather bomber jacket. How about that?
Wow!
Remember, this meeting is recorded now.
Well, I'll just take a hoodie. Right, the test. I'm cheaper than you.
I keep saying some t-shirts with for releases would be very nice and relatively cheap. I have a lot of Android t-shirts, so.
Yeah, are we going to have cute furry animal names for the Istio releases?
We can definitely.
We could.
Aspen mesh animals that we give out.
Oh, right.
The prize for the person who tests the most is they get to name the release.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That might motivate me.
Wow, this could end badly.
Well,
subject to approval of the TOC, of course.
Well, good thing we revised the code of conduct.
So to close the loop on this so that we can give Brian some concrete answers. Right?
Yeah.
So Brian, it looks like this is a good idea. We all want to do this, and you will not have any issues finding gifts from various organizations.
Okay.
So come back with what you need, and I'm pretty sure we can meet you halfway.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I guess with the IstioCon coming up, maybe we could allocate some of the money from there to just dedicate it for prize with testing and testing automation.
I don't anticipate it being anything big. I mean, like a T-shirt or something would be a great idea. Just something to say, hey, here's a prize for contributing. I don't know.
Right, participation, you probably would have 20, 30 people, right? Then you have a winner. Yeah, so there's some budget around and shipping cost.
Yeah, that's true.
And yeah, and just finding a way to do it with COVID. Like for instance, we have a closet that we cannot access anymore that's got a ton of T-shirts in it. All
You
right,
can access one every
look.
6 weeks, Josh. If you're on the rotation, yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, I think there's general consensus that we should try and replenish our swag. And I suggest people put suggestions in comments in the TOC doc. Josh and I will follow up internally at Google.
Yeah.
Then maybe you can poke the cupboard at IBM, et cetera, and Neeraj.
Yeah, we'll do that.
And then we'll put it all in an Amazon fulfillment center or something like that.
That's the hardest part, shipping it. Absolutely.
Just send it all to me and I can manage.
Oh, really?
No.
I'll just wear like a T-shirt every day for the next 10 years.
No, I want to. There's like these 4-foot-high gophers, like for Golang. I'm just going to ship them to Neeraj's house for storage.
I'll tell you an anecdote. We were trying to do this for some of our customers and new employees, and right now Zach's house is filled with boxes.
It's not the first time I've heard of it. Okay. Okay. Mitch.
Yeah, so this is both kind of a just raising visibility as well as a shout out to Brian Avery. Brian's done an amazing job on the feature promotion templates in the enhancements repo. He sought to really document very clearly what our development process is, and I think he's done an amazing job of it. Can't wait to use them across the board for the 1.9 release, hopefully. But as I was reading through the various templates, I was a little bit surprised at what our actual development process is. I know that we've tweaked our standards probably 5 times over the last 6 months at various TOC meetings, and each decision I think made sense in isolation, but I'm worried that perhaps the development process we've come at as a whole no longer serves the community. So as far as I can tell, the process right now is that you code up a feature and merge it into Istio, and then you can launch it as experimental. Then you write an RFC and a couple of tests, and you can launch it as alpha. Then you write a design doc and a test plan for the tests you already wrote for the alpha release, and then you can write it or launch it as beta. And I'm worried about like writing plans after writing tests and having design be the last step in the process.
Well, it's one way of looking at it. Is that people are writing a prototype to even, there's so many possibilities. The prototype kind of constrains the design and validates the design, but then the design is required before it becomes more real, like beta. I'm not sure if I like this. I'm just trying to figure out how it might make some sense.
Yeah, so one of the way we design this is when we look at the criteria for experimental, because it's the fact it's dark launched, we didn't want to set a really high bar for experimental because I think if I recall correctly, the major criteria for matching experimental is to explain the user scenario and be able to make sure you're not impacting the existing system so that you could potentially get some feedback with dark launched. So that's why we didn't want to set very high standards on design and test, but we do want to make sure people understand what this is, and it's not impacting the system in any way when it's dark launched.
Or is supported in any way or guaranteed to keep working.
Right. So I guess one potential source of friction, have there been examples where people have developed experimental features and then they've gotten tossed aside,
or widely adopted?
Well, I'm more looking at development process friction, right? If they've gotten widely adopted, then it puts a ton of pressure on people to go and fill out the gaps that Mitch mentioned, right?
Yeah.
The harder part, right, is if you're developing experimental to kind of do a proof of concept, and then you go into a review later, and the reviewers go, "No, this doesn't make any sense."
I see what you mean.
Then, right, that takes an emotional toll on people sometimes.
It's also a little bit difficult to act as a pull request reviewer. Often we'll get large pull requests that, because they're experimental, don't have any design discussions behind them or architectural documents supporting them. It doesn't seem like a great way to evaluate the code. To me personally, if the TOC disagrees, then I think we should.
No, I guess I would like. So there are a lot of people on this call that spend a lot of time reviewing pull requests. Do you guys see this as a problem too?
It will help to have some process to put all the experimental code in some separate packages, because the primary goal was to keep the experiments isolated and not impact the main code. So it will be easier to review it if, and at the same time have, stricter review for changes to the critical code that is not experimental. But I'm happy with the process in general.
So do we think we should move the RFC before things are checked in rather than between experimental and alpha?
Yeah, by the way,
people can still prototype in their own branch, right? Like you don't have to check into the mainline to prototype.
Right. By the way, I'm looking at the template right now. We actually do require RFC even for experimental. Yeah.
I'm also experimentalist with RFC before. I mean, even if it was not required, it always happens.
Okay, good. Let's make sure that that's clear. That like at least an RFC is required before you are checking things in.
Not approved. I mean, usually an RFC is presented, but the implementation proceeds without having all the formal approvals.
Well, I mean, we have the kind of notion of directional approval, which is like
directional approval, yeah.
Versus complete approval, right? Usually, when we approve an RFC, right, it's directional, anyway, implicitly, right? You're not actually approving the entirety of the design and all the ramifications and impacts and everything else.
So right now, it just says from the link that RFC is authored.
Yeah.
For experimental. So you have to have one. It doesn't have to even be directionally approved. So I don't know if we should maybe change that.
Yeah, that does, like, it should, like, there's no point writing the doc if no one's reading it. And particularly the working group lead for the area, right? So it's hard to see, directional approval not being the gate there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just be like require directional approval from one working group lead.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay.
Difference is on who authored the document, maybe.
Yeah, of course.
Would it make sense to require a test plan as part of the RFC, or is there some other way to get the test plan required before the tests are written?
It's experimental. We have it already for alpha now.
Yeah, I think for experimental, we've kind of said it's okay to not have full complete tests.
Right.
But our test plan is not the same as completed tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still overhead that is not necessary at this point. Maybe the code will not work. Who knows?
But there is an expectation that there will be tests for any checked-in code, no matter what. Is that? Sorry, I'm trying not to pull up the link so I don't mess with the presentation. But sorry, do we have a link to the template?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
It's in the chat. No, sorry.
That's experimental right there. This is alpha as well. That's helpful.
Okay.
My motivation here is simply that we could put the test plans somewhere in the workflow before the authoring of the tests. I don't see a lot of value in writing a test plan after you've written the tests.
Well, if the bar for the test for experimental is low, right? Smoke testing, effectively. You could see there being some value because the amount of tests you'd have to write to bring the feature, right, effectively to a releasable state would be much more significant, right? So and I'd really like to hear the work group lead's kind of subjective assessment of the testing bars that they put features through. Right, if you're going to take a feature in experimental and you say, okay, well, you have to write one test, right, that shows that the feature works positively, right? You're not even writing a negative test. You're not testing all collateral impacts. You're not testing scale. You're not testing performance. Right, that's a very small number of tests. Now, obviously, if you want to progress, you do have to write a test plan, right? We've said that already, right? We do have that in the phasing, right? And that is there at alpha, right, Mitch?
No, that's required for beta.
It's required
Alpha
for beta.
requires that the integration tests are written. Beta requires that the test plan for those integration tests are written.
That does seem a little backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, like, my thought is either we move the test plan before we require tests, or we just don't require a test plan. I don't see value in writing it post hoc.
But test plans are so trivially cheap to write, right, today.
Not if you do a good job.
The names of the tests you want to write. Elston, you're waggling your head in equivocation.
I mean, tests plan, including scalability, stability, you know, cross-platform versions and so forth, are pretty convoluted and not easy to write and to consider all the things that need to be tested. I mean, it's more than just the test names.
So Costin is right in that there are two artifacts to a test plan. One is a pull request that includes only the feature names that you intend to test and potentially scenarios if you choose to include those. The other is a section in the design doc where you lay out in plain text what your intentions are. So those are sort of the two halves to the coin.
My thought is you probably know your intentions by the time you're working on alpha. As far as design, although that may change, and as far as how you plan on testing it. Again, it might change, but after that point, it's kind of maturing. So start with a skeleton, but.
I think we may have lost Louis.
Yeah, lost Louis.
Some features are really tiny, like a new CLI flag or something that are just done independently by the other pieces. And some pieces are done that require a lot of parts from a lot of working groups. And I think where there's a lot of cross work group things, we really need a design first to get agreement. But where it's just something one group does on their own, it's almost better to implement it first, let people try it out. And then if we don't like it, just get rid of it, rather than trying to get agreement on it before people have even thought about it.
Well, so I think the question is that phase experimental or alpha that happens?
Well, I consider it experimental, but then a lot of the stuff I do is on the CLI, and it's just experimental, and it stays there until people tell me they like it enough that they want it to be made graduated. That's very different from something inside Pilot that is going to depend on a bunch of features and people will use in their routing.
Yeah, we could basically move our two doc things one step earlier, right? So basically we were saying you should probably have an approved RC before experimental even. So maybe we need to move design doc before alpha, and then the design doc includes the test plan. I think that the question is that too onerous for people?
It might be. Yeah, it might be, and I guess I'm not hearing from other people who are writing a lot of code here that they want this.
So I wrote a thing this week to list the injectors and show people which injectors were connected to which namespaces to help people understand what happened during a canary. And I wrote a design for it, and then I wrote the code. And while writing the code, I realized that my design was no good, and I went back and rewrote the design. So I think oftentimes some people like me learn more from trying it out and seeing the corner cases in code than we do from writing it. And the code itself is a helper to that design.
Well, so I think we expect people to at least prototype in their own branch before, right? Like they don't have to write a doc before they can prototype. Like we're saying, before you check code in, you should probably have a doc that at least kind of outlines what you're trying to do so people can read it. and then you can get that out in experimental and actually get users to try it out. But then maybe before we get to alpha, you should actually have a test plan.
That's exactly the process right now, by the way.
No, alpha, you don't have to have a test plan today. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, you do. No, I thought that. I thought alpha requires automated testing to some extent.
Like that's not the same thing as a test plan, then.
Okay. Yeah. Not the official plan, but it does require some amount of good testing around the feature enabled.
And the alpha does not require a design doc today either. So I think those are the two questions: should it require a design doc, and should it require a test plan? And those can be
building on what Sven said earlier about people doing the stuff in their own branch, I think one of the pressure points is that we kind of removed the branches. In the past, we had branches, and so if we provide some mechanism, automation mechanism to automate the build, test, everything else from the branches, we'll have a way to have kind of alternate builds that people can use with the experimental features on, and do all the trial and kind of reduce the pressure on getting everything into master. So when we release 1.8, for example, we'll have 1.8 official, and then we'll have 1.8 with whatever feature X. And that to be equivalent with kind of a private build, but with automated tests and with infrastructure and some documentation. I don't know if it's worth the effort, but it may kind of simplify some.
Do we have an example where this was needed? Like it seems like a lot of tooling and a lot of stuff. And I think we can support it with what we already have, right? Feature flags and whatnot.
Probably the DNS capture is an example. I mean, which kind of the first iteration was pretty bad, and then we keep iterating. But there was no need to actually have it in master when it started as experimental. Only when it became good enough to be used.
But we also got it with feature flag, right? So we were able to turn it off easily when we find out it's bad.
The risk would have been lower, and the churn and all this review process, because in a branch you also have kind of, less problems with reviews and less standards for review.
I think we should talk about branching as an option. I don't want to get it too conflated with the rest of this discussion. I think it's a good discussion. We should discuss whether we can make it easier for people to have feature branches and collaborate on branches. But
so is there one more?
What is the order of testing and requirements and code writing?
One more point on the same topic. Sorry, since we are on this subject, there is also kind of the subject of vendor branch or vendor extensions, or having some ability or some hooks to have kind of builds that are optimized for a particular vendor, which is also kind of something useful for some people, I think.
Right. I think the issue there, Carlson, is given our need to catch up on testing coverage, it's hard to, particularly when it's manual, right? The inability to kind of leverage that across multiple branches is going to really mitigate the value of that in the short term.
That's true. That's true.
If we're much better with automation, then I think that becomes much cheaper. Right now, we have to prove to ourselves that we can afford to do that. I'm not sure we're there yet. Like your example of the DNS interception, right? How did we find out that it was bad?
By using it in some production systems and enabling it, and because the tests were passing, and then.
Right. So it's much easier to get people to use flip feature flags than to redeploy.
That's true.
Yeah. I still think we need to hear more from the developers on this call if they're willing to participate.
Yeah, I agree with that. So part of the thing that we struggle as the project is people doesn't want to fill out the template for promotion because it's too much work. So we don't want to make this super complicated. People would shy away from it.
I mean, let me be clear. I think what Brian's done is great, right? Because it's
for sure.
Codifying things in the kind of tool chain that people use on a daily basis.
So I think the meta. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, good. I'm just saying, I'm not saying the work being done is not good. I'm just saying changes to the work needs a wider audience to get consensus, and be careful of the fact that today a lot of users doesn't want to go through the effort to promote to beta and promote to alpha. If we make this even more complicated.
And
harder.
I think Lynn, the thing I'd like to add is I'm wary. I'm getting increasingly wary of people bringing stuff like this to the TOC, because I think it'd be better if they could just convince other developers on the project to do this. That would be a far more natural way of doing it. And I'm afraid that if it goes to the TOC, we end up mandating things in a top-down sense that maybe people don't want and maybe don't make sense. It would be nicer to have this be grassroots.
Working group leads. Go ahead, Lynn.
Go ahead. I was just saying, good point. Yeah, go ahead, Neeraj.
So working group leads meetings, Shraddha, if you want to facilitate some conversations there, might be a good venue to do that. And then the people in that meeting can take it further to the individual working groups, because I don't think the conversation we are having right now is actually representative of the facts, because it's just 6-7 people talking who actually don't code much.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian and Lynn, go ahead.
Nope. Thank you for answering my question. I was just asking what the better venue is, and yeah, work group leads meeting sounds better to me.
Well, I'm happy to use this time, right, to poll developers who write code on a daily basis. I see some names and faces on here. Ed, sure. You already piped up. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the templates. Or we could just do a survey, right? We could just go direct to the grassroots thing and try to gather some information that way. Ed, do you want to?
I looked over the templates. I was imagining how I might make it easy on myself by doing the minimal possible.
So one of the things, by the way, with the templates that we wanted to do was have a couple people try them out, and they're living documents, right? Like if something seems dumb, then we should remove it, right? Like we should have people trying them out and saying, no, this is bad, we should include this. Like we should be more iterative with these, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think people are already trying this out. For example, Nathan has gone through this for multi-cluster promotion to beta, right? So Steve is working on like a gateway upgrade to see if we can promote that. So people are following this. It's pretty dangerous if we actually change it in the middle of a release.
So what are we doing to get feedback from those people following it and using that to update?
I don't think there's sufficient feedback because it's still part of the release. People hasn't really, nothing has been approved as far as the promotion so far.
Yeah, people reach out to me on Slack and I'm walking through the promotion of Canaries with Martin, but I don't know if we have an official feedback mechanism for anything like this right now.
So Brian, what would you like to hear in terms of feedback? Maybe we could put something together that's a bit more structured, that we could just, someone does it, then you ask them, hey, could you go fill out this form? It'll take you 2 minutes. And then we just let that accumulate for a while.
Yeah, so what I'd like to hear is, any challenges that people find, any confusion, that kind of thing, just general feedback. I don't know if I have specific survey style questions or anything like that right now. Just what's there right now? How is it working for people? How does it need to evolve to address the project best?
All right. So you just want to, we just want to record subjective feedback, and then once we have enough of it, try and draw some conclusions.
Yep.
Sounds good.
So at Google, we would create a Google form that would just populate a sheet, and you would just ask people to enter that, or you would enter it on their behalf based on what you heard in Slack, and just keep a log that way. However you want to do
that
it.
works.
Did we wrap up the discussion about when we require RFCs or design docs with test plans?
So I think we said we want to require at least one approval on like directional approval on the RFC before experimental. So I think we were suggesting making that change. I think we hadn't agreed on anything else. I can type that in the notes at least.
And per Lynn's comment, we would start requiring that at 1.9.
Yeah.
Does anybody think that that's too heavyweight? That we should really require the RFC with directional approval before alpha, but not experimental? Lynn, are you okay with that? Neeraj?
Yeah, that's fine. I thought that's what we have for alpha.
No, they're saying promote it so that you need an RFC with directional approval before experimental. That's the proposal.
No. I think Savannah said one of the work group lead has approval, so that's for experimental. For alpha, it's RFC needs to be approved, which you assume is multiple people and potentially multiple work group leads.
Okay, so everyone's okay with directional approval from a work group lead on an RFC before experimental? Yeah. Okay.
I would also state that maybe we can find a better way of organizing the documents by feature. Like if there's an RFC and then like 2 months later, there's an actual design doc with, here is another proposal for moving this to alpha and so on. These things just tend to be spread out all over the place. People just don't know the progression of things that has happened as part of the history of that feature in terms of, okay, we tried this didn't work, we decided to do X, Y, and Z because of so and so reasons. That provenance is actually lost, and so like number of people who come and ask us like, where are the design docs for this? You point them to the Istio drive and there's like 1 million docs talking about very similar things, and they get confused. But having that paper trail of some sort would actually help. And either we just make a folder in Google Drive for that feature and then say, okay, you put all the stuff for that feature from design docs to RFCs to approval docs, everything in that folder, which then means somebody who goes in can then actually chronologically look at the progression of this thing and understand what happened and get an idea of like, this is the final state of the feature.
So one of the things that the promotion checklist asks for, it asks for links to relevant documentation like that, as well as links to the previous promotion level.
So I wonder if we should put, rather than having separate markdown files for experimental, alpha, beta, have it all in one with just a section for each.
Yeah.
Would that help having it all centralized?
History of the thing, and which actually allows people to update it as time progresses and say, after 2 months we tried this worked, this didn't work. And
yeah, Mitch, did you talk? You and I talked about this. Did you chat with Brian about it?
Yeah, Brian has great plans for connecting all the various issues together along with their documentation, so that there is, Shriram, as you said, like a paper trail. It's not a reorganization of GitHub folders. It would all be sort of tied together by a file in the enhancements repo. And Brian, if I'm misrepresenting your intentions, please let everyone know.
Nope, that sounds like what I'm thinking.
Right, so the suggestion here was to treat the tracking issue like the enhancement and have a converged experimental, like section by section experimental alpha, beta, GA, right, in the template, and that people progress to that so we stay in a single unified artifact.
Not within a single issue, as I understand it, but that there would be an automated system that once a feature has progressed into a given state, updates a central file representing that feature. And that file ties together all of the issues, all of the PRs, all of the documents. That would be our top level record for that feature.
Yeah, that's my thought.
And then we have an auditable list or a feature inventory, and we can say, here are all the features that have gone through this process and their current maturity levels.
So I think that the question mark, that's obviously very useful from a kind of tooling and tracking point of view. I'm wondering about the behavioral side of it, right? About what we're going to get people to be able to keep track of in their heads. Like, are developers looking at features in the enhancement repo, or are they looking at issues?
So they'd be looking at this all needs to evolve and everything. Right now we just have the checklist, but they'd be looking at the feature and then tracking from that feature hey, here's the things that it met for beta, here's the things it met for alpha, here's the things. You can track from that feature to what the checklists were for each of those levels.
Right, so the expectation there is that the developer driving the feature is using the feature as the primary source of reference and not any one of the individual GitHub artifacts.
Yeah.
Including the tracking issue.
Well,
the tracking issue would be most relevant to a developer who is attempting to promote from one maturity level to the next.
Yeah, that's correct.
That would be where they spend most of their time, where they put most of their changes. The feature files would be more relevant to say, the Operational Excellence Initiative, where we want to look at all of the features and their maturity levels and what test coverage we have over them. But as a developer working on an individual feature, I think your perspective would primarily be targeted towards the issue with a template.
Yep. There's a difference between somebody trying to track back and say, hey, I'm implementing this feature on top of this. I want to understand this feature, so I'm going and I reference it, and somebody who's trying to promote that feature.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, for the developer, their GitHub flow will span across multiple issue boundaries as they progress, right?
Yeah.
Rather than staying within one issue. That might cause some friction, right? You could see how that might cause some friction.
Yeah. The other thing is going back retroactively. Like, we want to promote the Canary stuff to beta. So in order to meet the requirements for beta, you have to have met the requirements for alpha, which, looking at going retroactive, you need to then complete both of those checklists. If everything was in one checklist, then you'd have one issue to keep track of.
At the same time, the replacement, which is an in-place upgrade, is also not beta according to the criteria. So,
yeah. So I guess, Brian, like, I'm not overly familiar with the tooling in GitHub. Is it possible to have multiple checklists within a single thing, or to track effectively that enough of the checked items have been checked to meet a specific criteria, which we could then automate on?
So it's all markdown, so you can add whatever checklists and headings and everything you want. There's no reason we couldn't combine it all into one file. And then I'd have to figure out, as far as tooling, how to do regex or whatever to match those fields that have been completed. The challenge I'm seeing here that I know is coming up, I haven't figured it out yet, is the gating. As far as, hey, you know what, TOC has approved this promotion right here. The automation has to go ahead to update this file. Right now, we're just using GitHub issues, and there isn't actually a formal gate on that. But that's a related but separate issue.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think so Louis, one of the issues I'm just having with the whole thing is that it seems like too much top-down process.
Yes.
Right. It's the responsibility of either the feature author, the work group, or the work group lead to make sure that it is done in, like, the quality is there and all that. And checklists are already established that help a lot, right? Like, in making sure that you think through all those things.
Yep.
But do we need more process than that? Like, what's the? I don't quite understand where this discussion is headed.
Well, so Amanda, my reading of the process, right, is the checklist is largely just an in-place reminder, right, of the things that you should be doing, with a couple of strong technical requirements, right, that are necessary from a release automation perspective, right? Like, we have to be able to tell it, like, users, this feature is alpha, this feature is beta. Like we have strong external requirements and those types of things. right? And so the goal would be to automate that to the extent possible, so that developers have as few touch points as possible to be able to meet those requirements, right? That they don't have to go to 7 places; they can go to 1.
Yep.
The requirement has to be met.
I think the checklist I think is a good mechanism, but I think we should spend some time talking about all those check boxes and whether we need them all. That's where it could get a little heavy.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm suggesting to Brian that maybe we can get down from n distinct artifacts into 1, right, for usability reasons. Right. We can't. So we can't. There are some things that are immutable, and maybe there are some things that are optional.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like there's a lot of subjectivity in here, right?
Yeah, I mean, what we have right now, even before the checklist, was subjectivity. Somebody declares, hey, this is stable, this is alpha. This just says, hey, as a community, we agree on what these requirements are.
Yeah, I think I said this earlier, I'm sorry. I would like to see this be more grassroots and less about top-down mandates from the TOC. There's I mean, Louis, to your point, like at some point, yes, like there's a minimum bar for GA and a minimum bar for beta features, and we do need to set that. But I still think we should. It would be nice if this came from the test and release working group.
This actually did come from.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where this is coming from.
Okay. Leads as well.
Okay. Oh, really? The working group leads also approved this?
I don't know if approved is the right word. We've discussed it on several occasions. Brian, was there an approval?
I don't recall.
If the working group, if the majority of a large majority of working group leads approve this, I would feel much better about it.
Test and release or all working group leads?
All of them.
So I think right now this is kind of experimental, right? Like this is not.
Yeah.
Just trying this out. This is not the official process, but yeah, I think we should make sure all the working group leads agree that we should have this process and suggest changes to it if not.
Sounds great.
I think what we need right now is just feedback to see how it evolves, what issues people have, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So Josh, it's just one feedback gathering venue, I guess.
Yeah.
One crazy idea when it was discussed in the environment, I think, or some of the chats on Slack, in some cases, it's useful to have a different person do the evaluation if a feature is tested, completed, and boxes are checked from the person who writes the code. Because, people are usually honest, but there are some, other factors. So, and also kind of to have someone independent, kind of who's experimented with tests, who's familiar and understand the testing needs, makes the decision of what kind of test a feature needs compared to the person who writes the code, because also there is different motivation. So maybe the test and release working group should kind of take more lead on, doing this work and taking ownership of the checkboxes, and not the developer who's working on that feature. I don't know if it's crazy or not, but in some companies, that's how it used to be.
I'm highly skeptical if we can get that to work, Justin, right? Because then you're asking, for a very high touch human process, right?
There is a human process anyway. I mean, high touch.
No, I know, but you're asking it to span 2 people and not 1, and you're asking it to basically the test and release group would be just entirely interrupt driven by every developer working on their feature.
It doesn't have to be just 2 different people. That's what I'm saying. I mean, just like we have a reviewer and a code author, and every code needs to be reviewed, we should probably have kind of more people understanding a feature in depth enough and not have just one person
that has to be within the working groups, right? They're the subject matter experts.
Yeah.
That's fine too. That's fine too.
What I'm asking for at this point in the checklist is I'm asking for the person who wants to complete the promotion to follow through the checklist and the work group to provide their stamp of approval at the end. So what that means as far as the work group providing that stamp of approval is up to that work group. But
right. So the expectation would be that the working groups would act as a clearinghouse for their features in the various stages, and that they would have a nice burn down list to work through.
Yep. That's correct.
That seems pretty normal, right? In a world of distributed authority, right, where each working group, sets their own agenda, does stuff. If we had a lot more resources, Costin, I think we could do what you're talking about, but that's reminiscent of much more process-heavy organizations, and we seem to be pushing back against process, not the other way around.
I think working group lead is good enough. I mean, it's a good substitute for.
I agree.
Okay, so I guess Brian, you're in the process of trying to gather feedback.
Yep.
And that feedback is both on the details and on the UX. And maybe we have some people experimenting with this in 1.8, and then we'll go and at the beginning of 1.9 do a retrospective, and you'll probably have some suggested tweaks, and we'll make an assessment.
Yep.
I would like the working group leads to really say that they want this.
Yeah,
so
but
I think we can give them the feedback and everything from people who tried it in 1.8, and then they can make a decision.
Yeah, and obviously this is a collective decision. The TSC has no interest in imposing a process on people when those people have no interest in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think our interest here is in the minimum bar that Lou was talking about earlier. Right? Like, we want to make sure that there is a minimum bar of quality in the project, and we are responsible for project quality, but we want to do that in a bottoms-up fashion.
Sounds good.
Yeah, the other thing, yeah, we are responsible for making sure that all of the external requirements are met. Because there are external requirements.
Did we lose Louis?
We lost Louis again.
There you go.
Oh,
Louis back.
I have a ping session running in the background when I see when my ISP starts dropping packets. It's about once every 10 minutes at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I certainly think that there is a minimum bar, and the TOC would have to weigh in to make sure that minimum bar is met.
Right.
Yeah.
Since we only have a couple minutes left, should we move on and assume the test and release will own continuing to get feedback and continue to improve the process?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I think Louis froze again. So Shweta, do you want to go through the feature state updates?
Sure. It's not shared, but I know what I mean. The feature state, which is listed in the link, if somebody can share and click, most of them are stale. So, for example, Mixer is listed and it's already deprecated. Watson Canary upgrades are not even listed here. So, the question is, who is responsible to make sure this is updated every time, and how do we make sure that it is on the mark?
I assume this just ties back to the discussion we just had, right, with the promotion. But we do have an outstanding issue: is the existing status of our feature. Are they accurate? Are we happy with the existing status?
So I would try to push this to the working group leads. The working group leads should own the state for the features in their area, and Shweta, I think you kind of own making sure that gets propagated here.
Okay. But my question is, how do we make sure going forward that this gets updated, right? Like, we can work with the working group leads to make it updated this time, but this has to be like an ongoing process, right? Every time a feature, go through a promotion, can we make sure through a certain process that this sheet gets updated? Because I believe that customers go through to see the state of the features and it's not updated at this point.
But shouldn't that be responsibility of the release managers for each release to update this?
It is not yet, but I believe that should be the right answers if they agree.
Yeah, that seems like the right solution to me. I don't know if anyone else has a differing opinion.
Yeah, release manager seems fair.
Right, add it to their checklist.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to go. Okay, cool.
I'll add one comment, which is I think eventually it'd be nice if I'll have that updated automatically, but until then it would be great for release managers.
Yeah. I didn't mention that, Brian, because I thought we still have to agree on the graduation process.
You thought what? Sorry.
Oh, to agree on the graduation process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, turn this left, Lynn. Do you want to raise this issue?
Yeah, so I filed an issue and there was some related discussion. I just want to get more feedback from folks. So this is in the context of mesh expansion. We introduced the workload group and the workload entry, which is actually analogous to Kubernetes deployment and pods. So in the context of VM, we are currently using workload group to decide the VM's identity. So it's basically serving as a source of truth. When you set the service count field in workload group, we basically decide what the VM's identity will be. So yeah, so I'm currently wondering, because currently the workload group is actually in networking.istio.io API group. Does it make sense to actually move it to a common work group? I don't know, I just made it up. Maybe we can have something called core.istio.io so that we know this is some like a security and the networking critical resource, similar to how Kubernetes handles it.
I think at this point, moving things around is very disruptive for users. Any kind of change has always been a huge pain. And there are a lot of other naming related, I mean, the secure service alternative names and other things that are in the core networking API, like gateway and destination rules. So I would be very reluctant to.
Yeah, so first the question is this the right API group? Because workload group, we haven't really released it. Workload group is a new resource we are going to introduce in 1.8. I know workload entry is already there. Yeah, moving it, of course, there's a cost. Yeah, but
service entry is there. All the secure naming is defined there. I don't know.
Yeah, secure naming is separate. Secure naming is
well, it's the same thing because that's what it's used for. That field is used for secure naming, really.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, secure naming is not used for deciding the VM's identity, right? If you are using this resource to decide what the identity will appear in the certificate for the workload, I think that's the critical part.
Yeah, but that's exactly what it is. I mean, gateway certificates are there, destination certificates are there, subject alternative names are there.
No, these fields are not deciding the VM's identity, as I said. It's it's used to verify in other scenarios.
I think the point is that there's already a lot of security settings in APIs that are in networking.istio.io. Like Sidecar has some stuff in it too, and we've talked about expanding Sidecar with more things like telemetry and security, and it's in networking.istio.io. So, Leeman, is there any user feedback that this is confusing and needs to be moved?
We haven't really released the workload group, right? We haven't really give this to the user yet.
Sure, but I mean, on existing other things that set this, right? Like, do we have user feedback that they want security settings moved out of destination rule, or that moved to a core group or anything?
Security setting in destination rule, I think that's a separate topic. As I said, it's not serving as a source of truth, right? You.
Certificates, it is a source of truth. Right?
Yeah, you are not using it to decide the identity for the workloads. That's the difference.
So I'm wary of having workload entry be a different place than workload group. That seems strange to me. And we would need strong feedback from users and a strong reason to move it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to get more feedback from this.
Anyone else on TUC or any other people here have thoughts?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's harder for people to think about look at a different place given service entry and workload entry are under networking.
Yeah, if we move it, we have to move workload entry as well. Maybe if that's a very big pain, probably we will have to live with it.
And service entry, which is kind of very related.
No, service entry is different. Service entry is, I think it makes sense to stay in networking.
I think that also has
group.
Security.
Yeah, but to user conceptually, they're similar.
Service entry is like you can select a list of pods, right? Similar to, yeah. And then apply. I think currently it's mostly networking setting. It makes sense to leave it there.
How about proposed networking working group, where it currently is, and if the leads agree?
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to bring it up. If the consensus is we are leaving it in networking API group, then I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we think through before we release the, have this new resource being broadly adopted.
Okay, I think we're out of time. I think there's a proposal. There was certainly feedback that seemed to indicate that people were wary of moving it, right? So I think, absent any strong feedback in the other direction, that's probably the expected outcome.
Yeah, I think if you convince the networking working group that we should move them, then we can bring back to TOC. But I don't think there's a strong desire to move these.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not even sure we've ever had much feedback from users at all about the different API groups, right? Versus them just being Istio.
Yeah. Yeah. I just noticed that people are using API groups in the ACL when they try to decide which admin is responsible for which resources.
But they can also directly use each individual resource name, right?
Yeah. Yeah, of course they can do that. Yeah, that's basically relies on the proper documentation saying, okay, security admin, you have to make sure you include this worker group from this API group. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's something I want to bring up and get feedback. If you have some thoughts, just comment on the bug. Yeah. If there's no strong desire to move it, I'll just close the bug.
Okay.
And let's push the last item to next week, unless it's really quick.
Hey, so it is pretty quick. Let me see if I can get this done quickly. So there's a feature as part of open source Istio where we're trying to integrate with external certificate authorities. So one of the challenges is that as part of integration testing, we want to make sure that the functionality works. And so which means that we actually, in the integration test, we actually need to spin up the external CA. Now, some of the external CAs that we're trying to test with, they don't have a Docker image, as in they don't have a ready-made image that we can actually load onto integration testing. In fact, they just have some code out there. So, and now if we wait for them to build the image so that we can, add it to our integration testing, it's going to take time. So the question, I guess, that I had is that when we're integrating with external components, and can we afford to build? So they have source code that's out there. Can we actually build an image from their source code with their permission and load that onto the Istio Docker Hub and add that as a Docker image in the Docker Hub under Istio? And then can we use that for our integration testing? I hope that question made sense. I think it was, or did I go through it too fast?
So I think I'm aware this is a longer conversation. We're already over time.
Got it. Okay, so then we can.
More appropriate. Like, does this need to be TOC, or can this be discussed with tester between test and release and security to figure this out?
I guess I can discuss this with the test and release group, and then we can, if that's not clear, then I can bring it to the TOC again.
Yeah, I think so. If you need some approval from TOC, then it's good to bring it to TOC, but this seems like you guys can just come up with a plan.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Sorry.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.